So good to be here. Thank you, everybody, for organizing it, especially Matt and everybody on the teams, City, etc. I know these things are really hard to put together, so very excited to be here. We have a lot to cover this morning, so we're excited to get it up and running. We're going to talk a lot about what it takes to become a startup city. I know a lot of you have been talking about, like, we want to be a startup city, we want to do startup things, we want to be an open innovation city, we want to do open innovation. But what does that actually mean? How do you actually get it done? And what's the difference between what you're doing now and what you need to do to make it happen in the future? So here are my contact details. My name is Tim Papandreou. It sounds like Pap and Mayo when you say it out loud. I have an accent. It's just how it is, and hopefully you can understand me. But my contact details are there if you want to get there. Follow me on Twitter if you want. I have a lot of things to say, a lot of opinions, and you'll find out some more in a few seconds. So let's go. So a little bit about me. I'm from Melbourne, which is a beautiful city in Australia. It's very, very far away. My family is from Greece, which is an amazing place, also far away. And I basically lived and worked in my career in Los Angeles and in San Francisco, and now work all over the world. So I've had a really good opportunity to see how cities work, how they function, and all the things around the world that make them work. I've done a lot of cool stuff. I led the Smart City Challenge for the US DOT for San Francisco. We were a finalist, and we got a lot of amazing things done there because we really connected with community, which is a really good way to learn how all these cool ideas can actually become something in the future. We did some really cool stuff in San Francisco. I was the Chief Innovation Officer for a long time there. I was actually the first Chief Innovation Officer for transport, I think, in the world. And so everything you guys have been talking about the last couple of days is deja vu. So I've actually been through it, done it. So you can do it. It just takes work, but you'll get there. And we did some cool stuff that we can talk about what can apply for Jacksonville. We also did some really cool things where we actually created I think the first innovation hub where we basically created a startup in residence. We brought an opportunity where the governments publicly said, here are our problems, we need help. We actually need help, right? We need someone to come and help us with. Here are our list of problems. And we engaged the startup community ecosystem, which was very nascent back then. This is 2009. Very nascent, said, can you help us? And if you can help us and solve our problems, we'll actually do them. We'll use our city as a lab, and we'll try things out. That created a really big ecosystem that led to a whole bunch of ones all over the world. Like, we literally spurred this innovation zone hub all over the world. So it's amazing what an idea can turn into once you actually make it happen, and how you can spread it across the world and see it replicate itself and not copy. It's not a copy and paste. It's a replication. It basically looked at it and said, okay, we'll adapt and apply it to our situation. And we have these startup in residence programs and have helped build these urban innovation hubs all over the world. One of the cool things I got to do as well is I was hired by the founders of Google to basically go and join this team called Google X, which was like the innovation hub inside Google, to basically create and help be part of a team that created the self-driving car project, which we commercialized, known as Waymo. And I was on one of the teams there that basically helped launch the service. And so been there, done that, as Tim mentioned, like, I've done a lot of these different things, which has been fun. I have a reputation. It's pretty strong and loud. People know my reputation. I get hired all over the world because they know what they're going to get. They're going to get this. This is me. I get stuff done. My nickname is Honey Badger, and because I'm not scared of anything, we'll get it done. We'll walk in there, take the scorpion tail off, walk away, get it done. So you can't be, this is not for the faint of heart. You need to be really, really clear about what you want to do and get it done. And then Matt likes to call me cayenne pepper, because you just need a little bit at the right times and the right doses. Otherwise, you'll get burnt. So keep that in mind when you want to work with me. So this is fun. So technology is really an amazing thing that we have. We do so much with technology, but we also get about what it does. So typical situation here, anywhere you go, people on their phones, no one's Can we get a replacement? Oh, here we go. All right. So I'll say it again. Is it the technology or is it the people? Because this is what we see today, and then this is what we saw 100 years ago, right? This is the people on their phones. This is the people in the newspapers. We act a certain way in public space. That's just how it is. And we use our thing that we have, whether it's our device or our big newspaper, which is basically a really big old iPad. We use that to basically say, this is my space, right? So we use that. And we have so many visions of like dystopia, like this is the future. If we're not careful with technology, we're going to end up looking like Blade Runner. And a lot of the things that are in Blade Runner are actually becoming true, which is a little bit scary. But there's also like these other visions of utopia. If we just do everything like this, it's going to be amazing. But what's funny with both of these, they're always in these situations where there's no people and there's just not really interesting spaces. Like they look like rockets and they're like sitting on a beach. And it's like, is that really what we want cities to look like? So we also have these visions of like everything's everywhere. There's like monorail and high-speed loop and hyperloop and you know electric taxis flying in the air and all these different things. And there's one person walking a dog, and it's always like green grass. And it's like, is that dystopia or utopia? We just don't know, because that's just not how we live and work. And so when we look at the technology in the future, you know, one of the things I talk about is like, I'm from the future. I literally haven't teleported here, but because I work at the cutting edge of emerging technology, all of the things that people talk about that you've just seen today or yesterday, I was working on 5 or 6 years ago or 7 years ago. And so there's a lot of things happening. And I can say with pretty clear voice that the last 5 years of disruption that we've seen were more disruptive than the previous 50. And the next 5 are on a level that we can't even fathom. And reason for that is because we are going through a series of S-curves. So those of you that know the S-curve of innovation, we went through about 5 or 6 of them in the last 25 years. Now we're going through about 15 of them simultaneously. So we have now S-curves on S-curves. And what that means is that we're splintering every 6 to 12 months into a new area. And so that's too much for us in terms of speed for us as humans to basically catch up with. It's very disruptive. So things from like blockchain and AI, and I've grouped these together because they're actually converging as well. So not only is it like S-curves on S-curves, there are technologies that are emerging that are converging with each other to spawn brand new areas that we didn't think was possible. So blockchain and AI merging together to create all of these new paradigms. Robotics and automation, digital twins. And a digital twin is basically the virtual version of this around us. They're being built by every city that I've been working with right now. Electrification, energy storage, the idea that we can electrify everything, but then how do we store moving energy in places that make sense? And then 3D printing and DNA sequencing. So they're happening at the same time. So we're 3D printing in the real world and we're DNA sequencing in the virtual worlds, which is basically a lot of the new pharmaceutical spaces that are learning there. And then you've heard of Web3 and the metaverse, and you may have heard of NFTs and all these different things. These are all moving forward in their own way. And there's an area that is just being talked about publicly right now because there's been some released information to talk about, is that there's a lot of work going on with space and space energy, and how do we beam energy from outside into our planet precisionally at specific points across the planet, so we can have ubiquitous energy that's renewable, clean, and green forever, right? Imagine that. So there's a lot of these things that are happening at the same time, and they have huge implications for our economy and our society. And I'm just going to pull out just one of these threads, the AI piece of this in blockchain, and apply it to healthcare, which is an area that you guys know very well here. From that, there's 6 streams that are basically running off on their own S-curves right now. So that's just one. So if I go back to the 12, there's about 12 here. So imagine how many streams are running off. And so that Gartner curve they were talking about, that's nothing. That's what they can see, right? This is not what's actually happening in the labs right now around the world. And it's happening everywhere. So it's not just San Francisco or London or any of Singapore, these innovation hubs. It's happening everywhere in their own version. So there's going to be a lot of competition, because what's happening right now is, for the first time in history, there are more people living in cities than not. We're turning into a city planet. And what that means is that over the next 25 years, 3/4 of the world's going to be living in cities. And that means 3 billion people are either being born or migrating into cities. We cannot have what we have outside these windows and expect to sustain this moving forward. We literally have to change things if we want to survive it and let alone thrive in it, which is what we want to see happen. And so, I always like showing this because it gets people going, like, we can't go back to normal. That pre-COVID 2019 lifestyle everybody wanted, that's done. It's over. It's literally a shadow of what we thought was going. And you hear people say all the time, I want to get back to normal, because there's anxiety about the changes that are happening around us. And we need to be aware of those anxieties, but we need to understand we need to move forward with them. A little bit of therapy, right? It's like, I hear you, therefore, however, we need to move on, right? Process. And in the world of innovation, this is my mantra that I always work with all of my clients around the world, is that we cannot say this anymore. Well, that's how we do things. No, it's not going to work. You're not going to be leapfrogged. You're going to be deleted, right? So that's the difference of what's happening in the next 5 to 10 years. And so what this means is that we need to have a real big shift in our management mindset. And that's the most fundamental difference that differentiates all of us across the world. It's not our tech or our environment or our abilities. It's our mindset. And if we don't shift our mindset to try things differently, we're not going to make it. And I don't mean it to be like glib like that. It's literally somebody else will do it instead. There's a lot of push right now in the media, frenetically worried about AI and things like Chat GPT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're not going to take your job. None of this AI stuff is going to take your job. Somebody working in AI is going to take your job, right? Because they've shifted their mindset. So we have to shift our mindset if we want to see things move forward. And what that means is that we have to think bigger than we've ever thought before. We have to fear less. I come from Google X, which is basically a failing factory. We are the moonshot factory. We do moonshots, but our job is to basically fail and kill and repeat and reduce and destroy projects. We have people hired who their job is to basically hack the Google website, like destroy it, right? If they can do it for a nanosecond, they've won. They've got a great job, and no one's been able to do it yet. So you've got to really think about, what are we trying to do? So fear less about failing. Failing is how we grow. Anybody who has kids, little kids especially, you can't do everything for them. You have to let them fall over, otherwise they're not going to learn how to walk, right? So we have to let people and things fail, but fail fast and move forward. Open up more. If you really want to be an open innovation society, you need to open up. That means hang out with people who disagree with your beliefs, your ideals, your values, etc. Otherwise, we're not going to make it. We're going to become so polarized and so in our bubbles that other regions that are much more open are just going to move forward and just take over. So you can't have it all. You have to understand that you have to be uncomfortable, because that's how we grow. We grow when we're in these uncomfortable situations. And so it's really important to do that. Practice the idea of saying yes to every single question you're asked before you absolutely have to say no. Imagine the idea of like yes and yes, until you have to say no, right? Now, if someone says, walk off the cliff with me, you say no, right? But if they're saying, are you interested in this idea? Yes, I am. Tell me more about it. Like, just try and open up more. And we need to make more stuff. We need to make more things. We need to try stuff and make things. And the thinking big is different from betting small. Bet small so you can go big, right? Bet small means pilot, iterate, then go. That's a big difference. So this is what I want to really think and challenge you all as you think this through. And so the thing that's really big in all of the companies that I've worked with is the idea of becoming a platform. Now, transport is the original platform. It's the OG of platforms, because we had a train platform, right? But what are platforms? Platforms are really important places of connecting producers of information and services with consumers of information services. So I'll say that again because it sounds really simple, but it's actually quite complex. A platform is basically the intersection point between providers of services and information and consumers or customers of information and services. And that touch point is where all the data basically lives. And when you have data, you have knowledge. And when you have knowledge, you have insights. And they're not peripheral. These are actual insights themselves. So that means that you become different from everybody else, right? So every company wants to gather insights, not recycle everybody else's stuff off the web. That doesn't make you different. That doesn't make you special, and that doesn't make you valuable, right? So we need to think about how do you differentiate yourself through this. And becoming a platform means that you can take on more and more and more data and ingest it and digest it and then become much more valuable over time. Every single company that's the biggest company in the world in their economic vertical is a platform. Google, Amazon, the list goes on and on and on, right? So they're platforms. And you have to ask yourself as a city, if you want to become an open innovation city, do you want to be the provider of the innovation or the consumer of the innovation? Because you guys can consume a lot of innovation, you're becoming the customer. Everything that's been designed and built in Silicon Valley, you're a consumer of. But imagine if you were the provider of that technology and other markets around the world consumed your technology. Now you're in a very different situation because you're no longer beholden to what they're doing and to just be a customer. You are now the provider and you have the data. And when you have the data, you have the gold. So I'm just going to spend the next part of this talking about, so how do we go from an open innovation city to something that is actually practical? Because this sounds all like, okay, this is all up in the air, but how do we actually do it? So I'm going to give you a crash course in this because this is what I do for work. So I'll give you like a little soundbite of this, but it's really about how do you move yourself over from where you are today to where you need to go to. And I like to, Matt knows, I like to play with words and try out new concepts and stuff. So I did it last night for Jacksonville. So we heard this idea is how do we go from Jacksonville to Actionville, right? So how do we go to get it done? So let's think of it like Actionville is about getting it done. What does that mean? It means that you need to become Dataville, right? You need open data. You need a repository center of open data. If you have it, great. You need to build on it though. And that means bringing everybody in the ecosystem together to basically create a portal where you can basically access all the data layers, all the API layers, all these things, so that startups who want to come and join and be part of Jacksonville can easily get set up very quickly. A one-stop shop to basically access all the data that's needed to be accessed and work with the data to create and solve problems, right? We don't want them to come here and just make fun stuff. That's great, but we need to come in and solve problems. Proposalville, right? Open solicitation, unsolicited proposals, a portal where you can basically send all your ideas and concepts and have some group, maybe it's the JVC, review them and say, that's a great idea, let's try that out. Or, interesting, have you heard of this company? They're also trying to do this as well. Why don't we link you guys together? Do you need access to resources? What do you need? People, skills, etc. This is something that's been done in many cities around the world that are starting to understand that if we don't list our problems up front, we're not going to get the solution providers we want. Instead, what they have is salespeople saying, I've got an amazing solution. Like, what's the problem? What are you solving for, right? So we need to get that. This is really important. What makes you different? What's the authentic difference of this region compared to everywhere else in the world? Because that's what people are looking for right now. They have so much mobile capital to move anywhere in the world with the new changes in remote work and the new changes in the rules for remote work. Anybody can work anywhere if they want to. And so if you want to attract and retain new talent and claim to be an open innovation city, what is that thing, that secret, authentic sauce that makes you guys different? I'm saying sauce because I'm a foodie, so I love food. And Jacksonville, by no stretch, I mean, you guys have got incredible food. The history of your food is amazing. What's even more amazing is how many people, I've been to Jacksonville a couple of times, how few people I speak to even know this cultural history of your city. You need to celebrate it, amplify it, and expand it across the region so that everybody knows that this is different. This is what makes Jacksonville amazing. It's our food, our culture, our heritage, and our amazing local produce. Very few places in the world have all of that in one, but you need to market it, right? That becomes the draw. So Authenticville is really important. Pop-upville, right? So you guys should know where this is. It's right near Matt's place. So this is important because that's just to show you what you can do with space. Create pop-ups so you can actually have innovation hubs, zones. Don't wait for the building to be approved by planning in the next 5 years. Do it now. Find that parking lot there. Why can't that be the innovation zone, right? You can do that. It's just that you need to get it organized and get it done. Resilientville, like how do you become resilient? You guys are in a hurricane, water level, sea level rise, all the stuff that's happening. It's happening here. This is ground zero, right? So how do you become more resilient? And how do you basically foster that as your skill? Like how does it become your superhero trait so that you're not afraid, that you don't live in fear, that you don't have to constantly get barraged by media? Oh my gosh, look at this and this. Like how do you live in this space and become resilient so you don't fear the unknowns? You embrace them and you get yourself ready. You shore yourself up. This is a company I work for out of Boston. They are the world's first mobile charging facility. You don't need to wait 5 years to put charging infrastructure in the ground for electric vehicles. They're a mobile service now, and if you get into emergency services, you can use them right now, right? So there's options out there, but again, ask what you want. What do you need, and how do you get it? And then bring those companies in. And how do you become more open? So these Openvilles, like these hackathons, meetups for emerging technologies. We've seen the emerging technologies of what we think are coming. How do we get the conversation going in this city? Like we start by having these hackathons of like, what do we know? Who do we know? I met a guy yesterday who didn't even know that the JRTC even existed, right? And so we need to get it out there that these things exist. They're available. We should do them. And then Connectville, we really need to think of some basic layers, some basic layer infrastructure. There needs to be affordable Wi-Fi or free Wi-Fi in the places that are the most underserved, because that's where imagination can happen that you wouldn't believe, right? I've seen this happen in the lowest income neighborhoods across Latin America and other countries in Africa as well, where once Wi-Fi is available or once cell phone service is available, amazing things start happening within months. So this is the least thing that we can do, is to shore up everybody has access to opportunity and let them figure that out. And then as we start thinking about learning, you've got 3 amazing universities and a brand new campus opening up very soon. How do you create multi-generational training for emerging technologies? What's the best way to do that? How do we start that? You start by asking them to start providing courses, but many people have never even been to a university campus before, so it's intimidating. How do you reduce that barrier of entry? That's something that you guys need to work on as a group. And Wellnessville, you guys have an amazing wellness facility here, and you have incredible hospitals. These should become the centers of emerging health, wellness, and practices for emerging technologies. They already are in some respect, but there's a disconnect with the city. So how do we merge those two things together and make those things that we talk about for all over the world to see? And DeFiVille, you have historic roots as a financial center, as a banking center, but what about decentralized finance? This is the future of finance. Where is Jacksonville in that? So bring that here as well. It's much easier than you think. It's about bringing the groups together and saying, this is what we want to see happening in Jacksonville. And Makerville, we've talked about building microfactories, cobotic centers, worker spaces, maker spaces, and local artisan spaces. There's a lot of local artists here that haven't really been brought into the fold. There's ways to do virtual, real, and e-commerce platforms and get them going, Etsy is an amazing platform, and you can start from there, but why couldn't we do something that's more homegrown here? Like there's ways and opportunities to do that if you think about it. And think about what is the things that you want to make here, because we're not going to be relying on a global supply chain for very, very long. We're going to need to have more of a local supply chain, and at least locally sourced bits of this. Imagine a 3D printing facility that just needs raw materials that are available 30 miles away, but can make anything from anywhere in the world. If you could make it right here, that'd be amazing, right? So there's opportunities to do that. And if you're going to the metaverse and Web3, there's a lot of opportunities for Web3 and metaverse-enabled spaces that allow us to do civic things, like pick up all of your forms that you need. There's no reason we need to handwrite anything on these forms anymore. It should all be digitized. It's easily done. Have everything on your phone, have a digital ID, have a digital wallet, all these different things. This basically helps people who are unbanked who can't get access to credit, etc. There's ways that the city can actually be the adjudicator or the center point for all of these different interactions that really does close the digital divide, because the digital divide is actually increasing, not decreasing. So there's ways to close the digital divide by doing that. This company, for example, that I'm helping, even in Miami, that's basically developing a digital wallet for transportation to avoid the unbanked situation, because it's so difficult to get people access to things like an Uber ride, et cetera, if they don't have a credit card. But if you can have a digital wallet, you basically can override that and get access to that. The key is, do they have a phone? Do they have access to Wi-Fi? It's usually the two things. And we're surprised how many people have access to a smartphone, and then at the same time, how many can't afford the monthly mobile payment, right? So if we can help in that space, that's how you close the digital divide. And then Careville, I was in Bogota in Colombia last month, and I thought this was one of the most amazing things I've seen in innovation. These are called care centers, and these care centers are for women, run by women, because women do the majority of unpaid labor, and they're doing the majority of the work for caregiving, and it basically ensures they can't access the workplace, they can't access the workforce. So they have created these care centers where you can bring your children or the person that you're caring with, do your laundry, do all the stuff you have to do, and learn a skill, complete high school, focus on your health, etc. These are incredible facilities, and they're all co-located in libraries or next door to places. The majority of them are pop-up. This is the first permanent one's been built. But these are kind of ideas that you can do to help create equal access. I was hearing that 54% of the population is female, and only 5 or 10% of the VC and innovation tech is female run or female accessed. And so if you think of femtech, that's an entrepreneurial area that has 50% of the market that is being ignored. What are we doing, guys? If we're truly capitalist, this is a market, untapped market. Go and get it, right? So think about that. And then you have extraordinary assets here, your parks, but they're not connected. So how do we connect them all through a regional network? How do we create this travel, right? How do we create this equally convenient transport network where there's equal transport options? It's not take the bus or drive or walk or bicycle because this is better or harder, etc. There should be equal. And what that means is that you should be able to get from end to end without feeling unsafe, without feeling vulnerable to these enormous F-150s, right? It's like you should be able to feel safe to walk or bicycle or take your kids or the baby's on a stroller and cross the street and not worry like, am I going to get, hit? That's just not how an open innovation city would work. They would focus on pedestrian safety and on bicycle safety and actually deal with it. And you have such amazing bridges, right? But there's not a real walkable way to cross a lot of them. And so you feel disconnected. And so while you visually can see the connection, if you don't drive, you can't access this, right? So we need to make pedestrian safe connections from end to literally bridge communities, because that's when people feel connected, when they feel free to walk around. Freedom is not owning a car or having a family with 6 cars. That's entrapment. Freedom is being able to get around the city without having to use a car if you don't want to. If you don't want to, right? If you want to bicycle, take transit, etc., that's freedom, because now you have choices, right? So we need to think about that. How do we create better freedom of choices in a city? And think of the designs. Your locality, you're in my opinion, a tropical space. It gets steamy here. I've been here where it gets very, very steamy, but you wouldn't know it with the urban form. This could be anywhere. It couldn't be Illinois, right? I have no real place of space here. I have in the historical neighborhoods because I understood context of where they were. But since air conditioning, everything's kind of like changed. But this is Singapore. Singapore has basically said, we're a tropical city. We're going to utilize our tropical environment and greenify our city so we actually can create a place that is authentic and unique, but it's also economical, right? So they can actually save energy and stuff. And so if you think about that, look at this is their walking streets, right? So it's hot and steamy in Singapore, but lots of people now are walking because they've created these amazing streets where they're celebrating all of their indigenous flora and and it's just amazing, right? It's an art show, it's an art space, etc. But they're rethinking about their streets for people and not just to move cars. And when you think about Veloville, this is basically how do you connect your city? You do it through bikeways. Bikeways are amazing ways to connect cities. Everybody likes to go on a bike ride. You know, they don't want to necessarily commute on a bike, but they do like to go on a bike ride and go through trails, etc. But how do we get those trails to connect through the urban areas? How do we bring downtown, which feels disconnected from the beaches and from the parks? How do we connect them? Well, we do it through our corridors, and we create these nice bikeways. This takes effort, it takes work, but every city that wants to be a more livable city is doing this. So, you know, these are things to think about. So how do we actually physically do it? Well, you look at it and start from baselining, okay? This is a map that should be very familiar to all. This is where we are. But those red squares are underutilized, vacant, or public parking spots, right? So there are more underutilized and vacant public parking spots than there are actually urban sites with stuff on them. Do you wonder why it's difficult to get that feeling of a sense of place? If every single second block is vacant, empty, underutilized, it doesn't feel like anything. It feels so disconnected. And so fill in those spaces, utilize excess capacity. Every platform's job is to utilize excess capacity before they actually build anything different and new. So you have so much excess capacity here. Let's try and fill it in. Do with pop-up spaces, things that can be done tomorrow, next month, next year, not wait 25, 30 years for a plan to happen. And then look at your streets. You know, we are looking at our streets and say, oh, they're so busy, they're full, there's no room for a bike lane, there's no room for walking spaces. We can't close the street down to open it up to people because it's too busy, there's too many cars, etc. But look at the streetscape you have, right? It's just vacant parking lots, underutilized buildings, there's some things here and there. But that's not how you should look at your street. When you look at your street from how a computer, when AI looks at a street, it basically says, what are we trying to do here, right? We're trying to move people. Okay, what does a human need? A human needs about half a square yard of space to move around. Great, that's what I can work with. A person on a bicycle needs about 2 square yards of space. Okay, that's a good tile. So these are called tiles, right? So in AI, we call these tiles. And so saying, okay, 1 person, 1 tile, a bicycle or micromobility, 2 tiles, that's fair enough. But this box that you guys all have is 1 person in 8 tiles just to sit in it. And if it needs to be parked, it needs 16 tiles. And if it needs to move, it needs 64 tiles. So 64 times the space in a vehicle versus a person walking. Do you know where we have traffic congestion? There's never going to be enough lanes. There's never going to be enough space. There's never going to be enough parking to ever solve this problem because the box is the wrong freaking shape, right? It's the wrong size box to move people around. This is our technology. We should use this first, then use our bicycle and pedal, and then get on something and ride, or then get onto something and drive. But that's the difference, right? Rather than it being the first choice, we should make those other choices just as equal. And so look at your street when you take all the striping and lane stuff out of the way. Enormous, right? Huge rights of way. So let's activate the spaces first. Let's do urban form that actually makes sense for our area. So we can activate all those vacant lots with urban form and get stuff getting built, right? But then look at the street when we want to focus on people and make it equal in access. All of a sudden, we had no room because it looked like this, because we're so used to this, right? We've normalized this that we forget that if we actually use the same space, we can move people on their feet, move them in bicycles or electric micromobility devices. We can have dedicated lanes for autonomous buses and autonomous taxis, etc. And there'll be residual space left over for all of us that we need to drive. And this doesn't have to be every single street, but there needs to be a network of these streets so that it actually makes it clear to everybody who works, plays, visits, and learns here that I can get around in which way I choose. And I'll be safe, it'll be reliable, it'll be convenient, and most of all, it's gonna be fun. We need to bring fun back into this space. So it's been done. I did it in San Francisco 10 years ago. We've done it, right? You can do it, but you just have to go through all of the different processes and just make it happen. So it is possible. It's just that it takes a political will. It takes the business community to get together. You need to create a vision, a blueprint of what do you need to see different? What do you want to see happen in your space, and how do you actually make it work? Because this sort of stuff, even though you're kind of saying what's going to do with startups, many people who are going to choose to either move to Jacksonville or create a business in Jacksonville or want to live in Jacksonville, want to thrive in Jacksonville, they want quality spaces. They want walkable, bikeable, transit-friendly spaces. They want public spaces. They want places to for their kids to play, learn, and grow. If they don't see those things, it feels like Generica. Why would they come here? There's 1,000 other choices to live in. So how do you go from Generica to, Authenticville, right? That's a big shift for people to think about. I told you I have a lot of opinions, right? So this shouldn't be a highlight. And then how do we get to Peopleville? So the ultimate goal is, how do we get to a place, and this doesn't have to be what you have to look like, but it's just a vision of how do you get to a place where it's a enjoyable, open place to be around, where you can walk and bicycle, take transit, etc. You can create public spaces. You can have places where you can actually enjoy. You want to visit, you want to learn, you want to play, and it just feels nice. Those of you who've had the chance to travel around the world, your favorite places are probably places where they're high quality spaces, right? We don't remember a structured car parking as a parking facility as the place I remember when I traveled overseas, right? My favorite vacation didn't involve a big car parking structure. That probably is not memorable. What was probably memorable was Disneyland, right? Main Street. Or you went to those places where it's just a beautiful place where you feel fun, happy, you feel safe, your kids can just roam around. And even going to any of these local remote places around the world where you just feel like it's such a great public space. We need to bring those into our city, because that's what's going to draw people in and want them to stay. And so it does take the trifecta, which we talk about all the time, the helix of it does take better governance, better business, and better academic partnerships, but it has to come from the community. If they don't want to do this, it's very difficult to get it done. If they want to do this and the 3 other groups aren't doing it, shame on them, right? But we need to have all 4 together, and we need to do it together, because the experts in those 3 other boxes only know so much of the story. The true experts are the ones in the middle. They know the story, and let's get that story going for them. So if you like what I'm talking about, if you like these things, I have a newsletter that I'm talking about all the time called Riding the S-Curve. You can use the QR code and just subscribe there, but I'll make this available to the group as well. But the point of what I was trying to say with all of this is that it is possible. It just takes time and effort. And those 2 things, time and effort, are up to you. The more effort you put into it, the quicker things get done. And vice versa, right? So this is a really important takeaway that I think for all of you, is that it is possible, you can do it, and you will do it because you've already started today. So it begins today. Or actually began yesterday, but let's just say it begins today. And so that's what I want to part you with. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. I'm going to give it back to you.
So we have time for a couple questions, and I assume after that there has to be at least 1 or 2. So who wants to go? You need that
one. Okay. Quantification of beauty, so return on investment.
Yeah.
So there's a comprehension of beauty yields memory, which you spoke to. How is it that you would effectively convey to the necessary members to buy in and to understand that subjective to where it would yield that return on investment?
Yeah, so how do you measure beauty, basically? Well, it's not through a beauty pageant. We know that's not the right way to do stuff, but maybe some people like that doing that. But no, you measure it by basically asking the people, let them define it. What do they define this as? And why is it important value? Because it is a little abstract, but if you can show examples of, do you prefer this? We call it A/B testing, right? Do you prefer this or this? Do you like this or this? When you go to the optometrist, A or B? I don't know. Okay. B or C? B. Okay, now, so those are the kind of ways you can do that. And then you can start measuring it in terms of how many of these do we need in a certain concentration to make us actually realize the outcome. And then you can define it and say, let's just say, for example, beauty means rainwater gardens at the intersections of like 15 places in our neighborhoods. That becomes beautiful because now all of a sudden we see a difference, right? Or beauty means no one has to walk more than 10 minutes to a park of some sort, whatever we define park as. That could be a measurement. So there's ways to measure that in very specific ways after you understand what you're actually trying to get out of this. Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions?
So that's an amazing and compelling presentation, so thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
One of the expertises you have that you spoke around, but I don't think you spoke directly to, I'll start with a statement. I would argue that if you go through history, our leaders have not started with the assumption that let's figure out how to screw up the world so that we get to this place sometime in the future. I think they all did their very best to try and solve problems, but they didn't understand how all the connections worked and what the implications were. And now you think in the world of S-curve on S-curve, where that complexity gets immense. How do we so that we're not just innovating for the sake of innovation? How do we think that through?
Tim, that wasn't a planted question, by the way, because I get it asked a lot all over the world and with the cities. It's how do we create a culture of systems thinking? It's complicated, right? Systems thinking is hard because we live in a binary, we live in these sound bites, these Instagram, TikTok sound bites of like Twitter bites of like, it's this or that, right? It's red or blue, it's this or this. It's like, no, the world's nuanced. There's a whole spectrum of things. There's a whole spectrum of even opinions and realities. Your reality and my reality are slightly different because of just the way that we're set up. But systems thinking is really the way that you can actually do this, is understand that there's cause and effects. And if we can understand that if we have just transport or just the economy or just healthcare on its own, we're missing the picture. We're basically missing the piece. If we, as a community of innovators here, can help articulate the story of the system, the ecosystem that we're in, and how everything is interconnected, at the very least, no one can claim ignorance anymore. Because we've told the story, we've shown how things are connected, and we show the cause and effect of just doing this and ignoring that. The second hopeful layer of growth would be that now we're starting to apply and see what happens when we do this over here, over there, and be able to be agile enough or react fast enough so it doesn't get out of control. In the 1940s, the federal government, in its wisdom, thought that highways were the answer because that's the tech that GM and everybody else told them was the answer. And they said, okay, let's do it. But they put all their eggs in one basket and we end up what we have today. It was an unintended consequence. If we had systems thinking back then, they would have said, well, hang on a second, we need walk, bike, transit, and highways. And would have had a very different outcome today, right? Possibly a much better one. We don't know, but it would be different. But that level of information wasn't there. And so now there is, and so we can't claim ignorance anymore because we do have the ability to connect and join all the dots together and do it that way.